London mornings were always somewhat gloomy. A fine rain mixed with a light mist as it fell on the cobblestones, covering the city with a gray veil. Emma Harper, 31, a single living editor, was preparing her coffee in the small but tidy kitchen of her apartment. The aroma of coffee wafting from the kitchen and the faint sound of bread lightly browning in the oven gave her a strange sense of security. Her days were usually a series of repetitions. She woke at 8, checked her work emails while drinking her coffee, and then sat down at her computer. The bustling streets of London and the noise of traffic could occasionally be heard through her window, but she always lived in her own world, wrapped in her routine. This morning was no different. It seemed like any other routine morning. As Emma sat down at her computer, her eyes fell on the large rectangular mirror opposite her desk. She briefly examined herself, her brown hair tied back, a faint weariness on her face. She noticed nothing else. But when she looked into the mirror again, for a brief moment she saw a shadow that did not resemble her own face. Her eyes widened involuntarily, but when she moved closer to look, everything returned to normal. Probably just a trick of the light, she thought. Throughout the day, this small unease lingered in a corner of her mind. After finishing her work, she went out for a short walk. The drizzle left shiny patches on the surface of London's stone streets. People passed by with umbrellas, while Emma walked lost in her own thoughts. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed safe. However, when she returned home, she couldn't help but let her eyes drift back to the mirror, even though she didn't want to look. This time, what she saw was more than just a shadow. The face, it wasn't hers. The face in the mirror resembled Emma's features, but the eyes were different. Deep, empty, and carrying a terrifying expression. The lips curved slightly, but it was not a smile. It was a mocking, malevolent shape. Emma took a step back, her heart pounding. "You're imagining things," she whispered to herself, though her voice lacked conviction. She approached slowly and looked again. The face was now clearer, more vivid, and moving. It seemed to mimic Emma's movements, yet always inverted them just slightly. That evening, she tried to sleep, but sleep would not come. Whenever she closed her eyes, the face she had seen in the mirror appeared in her mind, as if following her. By morning, even the fear of looking into a mirror disturbed her, but routine forced her to step outside nonetheless. As weeks passed, these strange events intensified. The face in the mirror grew more distinct, more sinister. Emma tried to tell her friends, but no one believed her. It could be stress, they said. But Emma knew what she saw wasn't just a creation of her imagination. At first, the faces appeared only with minor distortions, the eyes slightly deeper, the lips slightly sharper. Then, the face began to move as if it had its own consciousness. It delayed Emma's smiles, prevented her from raising her eyebrows, and followed her gaze. With each look, Emma felt a fragment of herself vanish into the depths of the mirror. Her friends and colleagues were surprised by her growing withdrawal, insomnia, and irritability. Her work performance declined. She could stare at the computer screen for hours without producing anything. One coworker said, "Emma, you need a vacation. This stress is consuming you," but Emma couldn't even think about taking a break. At home, what awaited her were the faces in the mirrors. One evening, an unbearable curiosity drove her to look into the mirrors. She approached the kitchen mirror slowly. At first, the face appeared as a vague silhouette, then suddenly sharpened. Its eyes locked with Emma's, its lips curved in a mocking smile. But this time, it went one step further. The face smiled and spoke. "Emma." The voice was soft yet cold, ringing eerily in her ears. Emma flinched and stepped back. But the voice was real. "No, this can't be," she shouted, yet her own voice sounded faint compared to it. From that day on, Emma avoided mirrors, but the faces were everywhere. On phone screens, computer monitors, window panes. Even in the dark, shadows in the corners of the room seemed to carry the reflections of the faces. There was nowhere left to run. Her home, the world, her life, everything was filled with mirrors. One morning, Emma did not wake. Hours later, when neighbors entered the apartment, no one was inside. Only mirrors remained. They shone, alive, and laughing. It was early morning. The city was still half dark, shrouded in a thin mist, the flickering glow of street lamps reflecting off damp sidewalks. People hurried to work, clutching coffee cups, lost in their phones, wrapped in their own private routines. I was among them, walking briskly toward the subway, carrying an unshakable sense of fatigue. Not just from staying up late last night, but something deeper, a subtle unease whispering at the edges of my mind. I boarded the train and took a seat by the window. Looking outside always comforted me. The gray cityscape, overlapping concrete blocks, the faint sheen of rain on the streets, and the distant outline of skyscrapers. But today, even that familiar view felt slightly off, as if the ordinary had a shadow lurking beneath it. At first, the carriage was normal. A few passengers nodded off. Some wore headphones. Others stared into their phones. Then I noticed a movement in the window. At first, I thought it was my reflection, but what I saw made me freeze. There was someone sitting next to me. I blinked. The seat was empty, but the reflection on the glass was clear. A woman with shoulder-length hair, pale skin, and an expression I couldn't decipher. She wasn't smiling nor frowning, just watching, patiently, intently. I turned my head. The carriage was empty, just me. My heartbeat quickened. I glanced back at the window. She was still there, more distinct now, leaning slightly forward, her hands resting on her lap. Her movements were subtle but disturbingly deliberate, as if she existed in some parallel reality overlapping my own. "This can't be," I whispered. The train rattled through the tunnel, lights flickering and momentarily plunging the carriage into darkness. When the glow returned, she was closer, closer than any reflection should be able to reach. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. I felt a creeping panic rising. I tried looking out the window, seeking comfort in the passing cityscape. But her shadow slid across the glass, following me relentlessly. At one point, it felt as if her body were extending beyond the glass itself, hovering beside me in the empty seat. The other passengers didn't notice. They never did. It was as if the world around me was normal, and only I could see her. Only I could feel the threat she posed. Each movement was unnervingly precise, each glance fixed on me, as though she were studying my reactions, learning me. When the train reached my stop, I stumbled out onto the platform, heart hammering, trying not to look back. Yet, through the glass, I caught a glimpse of her again, smiling now, though the smile was anything but kind. At work, everything seemed normal. I sat at my desk, tried to immerse myself in emails and reports, but the image of her refused to leave my mind. The thought of the commute later in the day sent a chill through me. By evening, I had no choice but to take the same train home. I stood this time, gripping the overhead rail, eyes fixed on the windows. For a moment, the carriage appeared ordinary. Passengers shuffled, lights glowed steadily. The city passed silently outside. Then I saw her, slipping through the reflection, sliding closer with unnerving precision. This time, she wasn't just sitting. She leaned, as though trying to step into my reality. Her lips moved again, silently forming words I couldn't hear. Her gaze locked on mine. I realized then, she was not just a reflection. She was an observer from somewhere else, a presence that had somehow crossed into my world, patient, silent, and relentless. When the train stopped and I stepped onto the platform, I dared a glance back. The carriage was empty, but in the window, she was still there, fully present, fully real. Her lips moved one last time, her eyes following me as I walked away, a terrifying certainty settling in my chest. No matter where I go on every journey, she will be there, watching, waiting, silent, but always present. And from that day onward, I understood. This was no ordinary reflection. It had chosen me, and I could never escape it.